Howdy, and welcome to the first episode of You've Got People Problems, the podcast where we tackle the leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Melissa Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group, and this is episode 1. We'll be jumping right into one of the most debated topics in business, nepotism. It's a word that often, well, always, carries a negative connotation. But the question here is, should it? What if we consider the upside of how nepotism can actually make a business stronger? The key is not falling prey to the classic pitfalls that give nepotism its bad reputation. To break it all down, I'm joined by Rich Wolkowitz, a family office advisor, and Sarah Stern, a recognized expert in family business and EOS. They've seen firsthand the good, the bad, and the ugly of hiring within personal networks, and today they're sharing insights on how to make it work. In this episode, we'll explore why nepotism gets a bad reputation and when it actually works out to our advantage, the biggest mistakes leaders make when hiring family and friends, how to set clear expectations in a family-run or tight-knit business, and the right way to balance loyalty and competence when we're making hiring decisions. So if you've ever worked in, hired for, or managed a business where genetics or personal relationships play a big role, this conversation will challenge your perspectives and give you some real strategies for getting it right. Let's get to it. I just want this to be a conversation for all of us to talk about the idea of nepotism and getting it right, because I think nepotism has such a negative connotation in every way that it is used, and it doesn't have to. So I think there's a lot of good that can come out of nepotism. You two probably know the stats. I should have looked it up. What % of U.S. businesses are considered family businesses? Do either of you know that statistic?
2/3. 2/3 of them is the latest statistic I've seen. Do you have a different one, Rich?
No, that's about right.
Yeah.
2/3 of our businesses in this country are family businesses. And most of them, from what I've seen, get accused of nepotism at some point in their trajectory. And so my thought was to kind of turn this on its head and talk about how could this be a good thing? So maybe we could start with the definition of nepotism, the practice of favoring relatives, friends, or associates, especially by giving them jobs. So the fact that definition, it's a neutral definition, right? It just is what it is. And so I thought we'd talk a lot about that, introduce Predictive Index, introduce EOS to those of you who don't know those acronyms, PI and EOS, and really trying to get good tools and data in people's hands to run businesses, especially family businesses, knowing that they're the bulk of our economy. And if you're not familiar with one or both of those acronyms, I think you'll have a great part in this discussion today. You will not be ousted. But as I mentioned, Sarah is an expert EOS implementer and family business expert. Rich is a family office expert and family advisor. And I'd love for them to introduce themselves in just a moment. And then to introduce myself, if you don't know me, I am a 5th generation family business member with a passion for solving people problems in the family business space. I'm also a Predictive Index implementer with 17 years of experience optimizing talent and engagement in businesses of all sizes. So maybe let's go back to, well, first let's finish our intros, I guess. Sarah, tell us what EOS is and what role does it play in successful family businesses?
Well, first, thank you for having me. This is really exciting. And I love that you come to this conversation from a 5th generation standpoint. That's still rare in the US. I hope it will become less and less rare, but you have such a excellent way of looking at the topic of family business and talent, and this fun conversation about nepotism with your PI experience and your day-to-day experience. So EOS, it is a chapstick, but that is not what I'm an expert at. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a system to run your company. It's not software. It was created by a man named Gino Wickman, who was working in his own family business when he created it. So EOS is the actual term, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. There's more than 25,000 companies using EOS around the world right now that we know of, and we believe that number is actually times 10. So 250,000 companies using EOS around the world. And it really helps any entrepreneurial company. I'm particularly excited about when it helps family businesses, but it was built for any entrepreneurial company with 10 to 250 employees who want to get really clear about their vision, get traction toward that vision, and then also be healthy teams.
Great. Rich, what about you? In the world of family offices and ultra high net worth families, how are you leveraging EOS and people data to build more efficient and profitable, healthy organizations and families? And then maybe you can define what a family office is for anybody who isn't familiar with that term.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me too, Melissa. It's great to work with you. And I've worked with Sarah too. And EOS and Predictive Index both play a role in my world in helping multi-generational complex families. And even when they're not complex, it helps to make them less complex, or to get out of control. So family office is the world I live in. And really what that is it's multi-generational families that have accumulated wealth of certain levels and of all types of wealth and from different reasons, whether it's inheritance, just growth of business, or maybe pre or post liquidity events in selling a business. And so what it is it's really a hub or a centralization of all the services that complex families need: tax, estate planning, business planning, wealth management, investment management, real estate, insurance, banking, investment banking. All those technical things that families need is housed there in the family office, either providing those services in-house, getting them externally and outsourcing them, or a combination of both. And also managing the family and the family dynamics. And that's what we're going to get into more so. So it's balancing, going back and forth, toggling between what I call those left brain things, those technical things, and the right brain, which is family dynamics and communication and conflict resolution.
And those kind of are above the family businesses, right? Because for these families, there are usually multiple different facets of their world. And so it's housing all of those responsibilities.
Yeah, I think the origin of it dates way back, but it really kind of progresses from having a family business and then moving to more businesses and more complexity in your estate plan, maybe a foundation, et cetera. And then it's called family enterprise, because you're not just a small family business, you're now an enterprise with enterprise issues. And then it evolves to the next step, which is family office, which is management of all those things and growth and maintaining that security.
Great. Thank you. That's a new term for me in the last 5 years. So I don't want to assume that everyone knows all the things all the time. So from my angle, anybody who isn't familiar with Predictive Index, the easiest way I think to think about it is an EEOC compliant way to get the right people in the right seats using people data, how to develop and retain them most efficiently. And it's one of the core tools my team uses to help clients achieve a 10 times return on investment, which is always the hurdle we're aiming for and trying to get our clients aligned around. You. How do we get there? Is it better productivity and profitability? Are there safety components we need to get under wraps? Or is it about retention? Because we know how expensive turnover can be, especially among key players when they burn out or are just in the wrong roles. And in family business, that happens honestly more often than not from what I've seen, because there are expectations about who is the heir apparent versus who is the talent apparent. And so I just think it's a fascinating place to play in. So the next segment of our discussion, I was hoping to do a Q&A, and then we'll move into some tips and tricks for anybody that has this, like, maybe they feel that they've got some nepotism or they've heard those cries from employees in the past and want to be addressing those, and give some specific tips. And then if you've got questions, we would love to hear them, and we'll answer those towards the end of the discussion. So in our Q&A, Sarah, I had a couple of thoughts for you and for Rich. So I'll start with you, Sarah. So you've been helping companies implement EOS for 10 years now?
Yeah, almost 10. Yes.
So exciting. It seems like it has gained so much traction as an idea in the last 3 or 4 years, but it isn't a new idea. And so as you think back in history and to today, and maybe how those have changed, what are you seeing in terms of the main people issues within family businesses?
I love this question. The main issue is what you said right there, is the well-meaning placing of people in the wrong jobs in companies. And we like to say in EOS, right people, right seat, but I think in EOS, we stole that from some other smart person. I know Jim Collins talks about the right person on the bus. And the biggest thing I see, and I say this in jest, but it's also true, is family businesses trying to make their org chart or their accountability chart look like their family tree. And that doesn't work. You need to have a family tree over here and then run a great business over here. And to be really specific about right people, right seat, we're saying people who really fit with the culture, and then people who understand their job. They really understand their role. And as simple and as said over and over, I guess, that sounds, it is the most common thing I keep running into. And it's really hard to fix.
It's really hard to fix. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of expectation. It's often a taboo topic, and it needs to not be, because we need to honor who people are. I've seen so many parent CEOs who had tons of sales talent, and the ones that make that leap go, oh my gosh, I'm adding more value to the company than I could have. I'm not bogged down in administrative issues. I'm having more fun, and the business is better off. But the courage to make that leap was really scary. And so I can't underline that right people, right seats. It may be an EOS term, but I think it's also a really easy to understand term. Do we have the right people in the right positions that honor their aptitudes and talents, that align with the organization's values? We kind of assume that family values and organization values can be the same. They often aren't.
Yeah.
And so being clear about that, I think, is helpful. So, Rich, I have a kind of a two-part question I was thinking about for you. So when we come back to this topic of nepotism, what issues do you see with nepotism in the family office space, and what benefits, if we want to flip it on its head, do you see?
Sure. So, I tend to look at things in a continuum, and I try to have my family clients look at them that way too. So if you look at a spectrum and you say no nepotism on one side, never, no family permitted ever, versus on the other end of the spectrum, family always, no matter what, no matter if you're qualified or not, your family, you're in, you have a job, right? Neither one of those is a healthy approach, right? There needs to be a balance. And so the same is true in life in all respects. So, the positive, let's talk about the positive first. I think everyone focuses on the negative, and you kind of know the negative, and you see it on TV, you hear about it, you read about it, you know it. But I think the positives really need to be thought about more often. And so in looking at the positives, first you need to understand who the stakeholders are and really understand from their lens what the reason is for nepotism and the positive reasons for it. So first, let's just take the current ownership, the current leadership, the family who is in the leadership role now. Well, they want a succession plan themselves, right? And how are you going to find those types of people who deeply care as much about the business as they do? Now, non-family employees can deeply care, but do they have an economic stake in the future success of the enterprise? Some you can set up compensation plans where you reward non-family employees or even family employees for that success without having ownership. But ultimately, when you're looking at ownership, that creates a pathway for success for the future. So if the current ownership sees that pathway, what does that do, right? It gives the ownership confidence in wanting to invest and reinvest in the business. And that's a big, powerful statement there, because now if you're the other stakeholder, a non-family employee, you're worried about your own family security. And you're wondering, is my job secure? Is this business secure? Is it going to survive me? Is there a place for me to grow and evolve in this enterprise? And if the future of ownership is unknown, insecure, unstable, well, to me as a non-family employee, I'm looking at saying, I don't know if this is the place I want to be. So if you see that pipeline coming down the road, wow, that makes sense for me to want to be here as a non-family employee. So you've just addressed ownership positivity, non-family employee positivity. Let's talk about the other kind of stakeholder community out there. Some of your trusted advisors, and who's probably the most critical trusted advisor to a business? Your banker, right? Because businesses need loans, they need financing, they need growth capital. And what's the thing that bankers look at before they give you money? They want to know your succession plan, right? They want to know if somebody gets hit by a bus, who's there next? Hey, we're in this for the long term. We see a well-reasoned plan. And so it gives them confidence to loan you money, right? And then I guess maybe the last stakeholder, we could keep talking about more and more stakeholders, but it's the next gen themselves, right? And what an amazing opportunity for them to come into a foundation that they grew up in. They knew, they saw firsthand the development of the business, and now they're starting to see their own legacy and what they can put their own thumbprint on that business to drive it going forward. So that's another positive thing about nepotism and creating a pathway for the next gen.
Those are fantastic points. I hadn't really thought about the banker recently, but they want to know that not even just the hit by a bus, but we have a lot of boomers who are still running businesses. And if their kids aren't around, what's the longevity of this business and the ability to pay back these loans? So it's an interesting takeaway for me. Sarah, what about you? The topic of our discussion is using these tools and systems as a framework for our foundation to get nepotism right. So if you think about leveraging EOS framework and tools, how does that help families protect themselves and support them from the nepotism gone wrong there's even jokes out there about nepo babies is a thing. I didn't know that until I started researching this. It's a phrase that millennials use to describe trust fund babies, celebrity babies. That isn't a compliment.
Right. That's not you're not saying, oh, lucky you when they're saying that at all.
So how do some of these tools protect us from those negative experiences that people have had?
Yeah. There's two sides that I see for protection there. One is on the family side, when we use this concept of right person, right seat, and saying, defining if a person is in a right seat, we actually ask 3 questions. Does the person get the job, right? Does it just make sense to them? Do they want the job beyond just feeling like I have to take it? And then do they have the skills and the ability to do the job? So do they have the capacity to do the job? What I get to see every day working with family businesses using that concept, especially when they use it consistently, is sure, they might give a family member the chance for an interview that they might not give to someone else or as quickly. They'll give it as quickly because somebody's a family member. But when they use this concept that they have to get the job, want the job, have the capacity to do the job, it takes care of 2 things. One is hurt feelings go away significantly when you're always using that rule, right? We need you to get the job, to want the job, to have the capacity to do the job. Now it's not, well, you didn't get the job because mom never liked you or dad never liked you or you're the step kid or some kind of other hurt feeling thing that will come into the situation. The other thing is when you're telling all of your employees, this is our standard for every employee, you get to avoid some of that morale that can go down when they're like, well, of course, so-and-so got the job, or they don't even have to work at their job, or some of that kind of thinking. The other thing that helps a lot, and you were talking about this already with maybe a next generation person who their aptitude that PI might share, and they also probably know, right? It's these 2 things. They know what they're good at, and PI reinforces that, is it helps prevent the situation where you're just forcing people into roles. And I have no data for this other than personal experience, but what I see is this alarming rate of chemical abuse, or at least chemical dependency in family businesses. And my hypothesis around that is people feeling like they have to be something they are not. And so when the family business uses right person, right seat, and they use it consistently, they stop shoehorning people into roles where they're going to have to lean on chemical abuse or gambling or some other addiction to just live their life day to day.
Oh.
So, right. So you're seeing this too from the look on your face. Now, I don't see any data. I can't find research. I can't find proof other than just seeing it and feeling it in the rooms that I get to be in. So I can't prove it, but I really believe that this kind of thinking helps minimize some of that hurt that can be done. Again, I said this earlier, with good hearts and good intentions of saying, we're going to elevate you to this role, or we're going to give you these experiences, but they're actually not uniquely skilled to have the experience, and it ends up hurting people.
It's really interesting you say that, Sarah. I was talking with someone actually that Rich introduced me to, and she was saying she was in her family business working, and she knew she was in the wrong role. And she was introduced to Predictive Index. And in PI, there's yourself and your self-concept. And it basically is, who are you naturally, your rubber band at rest? And the self-concept is, how is your rubber band stretching to be effective in the last 60 to 90 days? And she said the two pieces were so out of whack that the person who was looking at her report with her said, you either are or will be having some serious medical issues based on the amount of strain you're putting on your natural approach to be something entirely that you are not. That imposter syndrome leads to physical ailments. And she said, I was already experiencing some pretty serious physical issues that I had talked to doctors about. I had been to chiropractors. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And it turns out it was the right person, right seat. But I felt like I was having to choose between personal happiness and family loyalty. And guess what? Family loyalty was winning. I mean, Rich, you brought up the other day when we spoke about toxic loyalty, and it physically can be toxic. And I think it's such an important point, Sarah, that if we put some tools in place to make it about that, rather than your loyalty to the family, and this is the role that we've scoped out for you, wow, it can take addiction, health, so many factors, and maybe make them less
prevalent, common.
Yeah.
You know, that GWC, that get it, want it capacity to perform, is a really powerful and very simple tool. Mm-hmm. I use it in my practice. I'm not an EOS expert. I'm an EOS believer. Yeah. And I've found it since 2016. I stumbled upon it by accident. And in my work I do today, I've got a multi-factor test when I'm doing assessments with families and the roles they should play. And the GWC, I'll tell you, is the most powerful, and it's the most eye-opening. So for example, in the G, do you get your job? I can't tell you how many principals the chief person in the family responsible for the enterprise does not really get the job he or she has. And you might say, that is just so bizarre. Why is that? And so if you ask some of these family leaders, they think their role is a visionary, a strategist, a big picture, big thinker, consigliere for the entire system. But when you look at their day-to-day functions, they're in the weeds, they're in the operations, they're micromanaging. And so you say, do you really get the job, right? Do you really get the role? Not like what you're morphing into, but like you have to stick in your lane. Like in order to have an organization, do you understand? Do you get your job? And so it's really like to probably the most powerful person in the organization. The get it is there. The wanted, as you talked about, I can't tell you how many family members you were just talking about. And Sarah, you're right. They're put in these positions of obligation, out of birth order, maybe out of gender, and they're just put in these roles, and they feel like they can't say no. If they say no, it looks like you're ungrateful. It makes it look like you're spoiled. It makes it look like you're entitled. Everything that goes against the core family values. So when you ask people, do you really want the job you're in? I can't tell you the number of people that tell me absolutely not. And then if you look at the capacity, right, the C, you know, that kind of speaks for itself. That's more self-evident than the other two.
Yeah. Oh, that's so well put. And you know what I've seen is situations where people say, I want to help the family. I want to do the thing grandma imagined I would do, but I don't want it to look like this. Yeah.
And all that really does help avoid that toxic loyalty perspective from in the family. You can have loyalty that's healthy, and you can have loyalty that's unhealthy. And I call that toxic loyalty. And that's where just you're saying yes to make someone else feel better and to conform to some idea that others have, or your own personal guilt that no one else can step up. And there's lots of ways to avoid it, but just looking out for that kind of concept, right? Yeah. Has my loyalty, as we talked about in the spectrum of nepotism, can be never, or nepotism always. You need to kind of take that same perspective when it comes to loyalty and testing yourself.
Melissa, talk about how you help families manage this and work through this. It's so important, and I want to hear.
So so coming from Gallup, right, spending several years at their San Francisco and Houston offices, to me, it has to come back to data, because no matter how much experience I have, if I don't have data in hand, my training says it's not as valuable. And so that's a script that maybe I need to rewrite. But to me, I think there's validation in seeing some data. And so whether we're looking at an employee engagement survey where we're getting an engagement pulse on every team through the organization to say, here are some great leaders that maybe, it's a cousin or a family friend or any manager in the organization, this person has some real potential. They get it and have capacity maybe to do more that we can elevate. Maybe we have a leader who should be an individual contributor and not a people manager, and we can use that data to open a discussion that people maybe were avoiding. In the predictive index space, it's so fun because that clear personal stretch between who I am and who I feel like I need to be for you can put up some great red flags. So even parents or family members, or even the leadership team that couldn't really couldn't really hear, this is the wrong person in the wrong seat. If you can look at that data, that might shine a mirror on something that we knew was under the surface and can force us to have at least a conversation around, do we modify this role a little bit? Are we getting the most out of this person? What are we leaving on the table that they have to offer that we have not tapped into? I have one family I'm working with that there's a chief sales officer that is a next gen that really should be a chief community officer, because this person's heart is all in the community. All of their employee base comes from this community. And that's where we're trying to move him into. The older generation is very resistant to that because they don't think that's a real job. But if the cost of turnover for them is huge, and if we can stave that off and maintain the relationships in the community that are regulatory, there are so many facets. And so it's kind of interesting finding that right people, right seats. And sometimes there's a piece of the accountability chart or org chart we haven't even thought of that would honor this person, because I've seen family businesses where there were people we should have paid to stay home because they are so unhealthy in the organization, and we would have done better even at whatever salary they were at, paying them to stay out of the way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. When you put the data in with the work that you do, it also helps it be less personal. And it's so easy to have things get personal, and then you're fighting about something that isn't even the point. I love that. And I love that PI is a short assessment to take for the person taking it. They don't have to give a half a day. They don't even have to give a half an hour. I think that's so powerful too.
It's not an interview with an IO psychologist. It is 5 minutes and 2 questions, and we're getting so much data. It isn't the whole story, of course, but there are some real markers of what's happening and how does this person process information and how do they need to be successful? How do we communicate with each other better? Because those pieces really matter both in the family bucket and in the business bucket. So I'll turn that question back to the two of you. When you think about identifying and addressing the nepotism that gets in the way, how do you two work with families to bring that to light and work through it?
I'll go first on this one. One of the biggest ones I do, and at least 2 of us have said, accountability chart or org chart. In EOS, we talk about an accountability chart, and it's more than just who's at the top and who's at the bottom. It's about what is every single seat accountable for. And
talk about this.
Oh, good. Oh, good. When we do this work, when I get the chance to do this work, I often ask questions like, is there anybody in the room or in the business who's off limits? So I just ask simple questions like that. And then I get to dig in and say, why are they off limits? What's going on? What is the motivation there? Why is that happening? I also get to ask questions. One of my favorite ones is, as we build the accountability chart, if there's some back and forth about who should be in which seat, I will often ask people, who's speaking now? And my best example of this is once a dad who was the founder of the business was really pushing back, saying he didn't think his daughter should run sales. And she was saying, I think I'm good at it. Why don't you think I'm good at it? I've been doing it, and asking these questions. I could see her feelings getting hurt and her, like the wind coming out of her sails. And the dad was saying, well, I don't know. I think it's too much time and this and that. And thank goodness I had this moment to say, is it dad talking or is it founder talking? And he said, oh my gosh, it's dad talking. She had 2 little kids and he was scared to death.
Grandpa talking was who it was.
That's a good point. I wish I would have thought of that. It was grandpa talking. He was worried about his grandkids. And when we took grandpa out of the room and we put the founder and the visionary in the room, he couldn't think of anybody he would trust more. And we had such a less personal, less emotional, not that I think emotion is bad. I mean, family business is emotional. I get emotional because it's so important and so powerful and there's so many of them. But the hurt feelings came out and the real conversation could happen.
I actually want to back you up on this topic because anybody who isn't running on EOS already, I want to make sure the idea of the accountability chart is clear because this could be a huge takeaway for people who don't know about it. And so I'm going to give it to you in blonde terms and then you can tell me what I miss. Fair?
Love it. Okay.
Okay. So when I talk to my clients about an accountability chart, I just say, okay, take your business and take all the people off the map. You don't have people in your business. And I want you to just think about what needs to happen in the business. Do we have a sales and marketing function? Do we have something to do with finance? Do we have something to do with operations? Those are usually the key buckets, but there are often other things. And what has to happen in those buckets? And then are there roles that support those buckets because of our size? And let's scope all that out. And there are 0 people here. All there are responsibilities. And then when we have something fleshed out that's a draft, we can say, okay, we can look around and say, who are the people we already have on the bench? Because they're all on the bench at this point who could do these jobs. And it's amazing how many people have never thought about it that way because all they see are faces. These are the tools at our disposal, and this is what we have to get done, and we have to match them up. But if we decouple, it sometimes frees up conversation. So,
oh my gosh. See, you did the blonde version. It was perfect. It was genius. It was so good. That is an accountability chart. That is how you build an accountability chart. The only thing I would add to tighten that up a little bit that I've seen help people is you build the accountability chart for the business, not for the people. And it's just a different way of saying what you said. You build the accountability chart for the future of the business and the well-being of the business. And then I like to add on to this when I'm working with family, with the owners, is I say, I've noticed this kind of interesting correlation. The more profitable the business is, the happier the family. Anybody else ever noticed that one? So let's build the accountability chart for the purpose, for the business, so there can be great profit there, because that in the end is what really makes the family happy, not shoving people into the business, making them do things they're not good at, or keeping people around that aren't good at what they do. The other thing I'll say is, without an accountability chart or this way of thinking about your people, what you're doing is you're letting your most beloved people, your family members, come to work and be bad at their job, and everyone knows it. And it's like the emperor's new clothes. They're walking around naked all day, every day, and everybody knows it. And you as a family member are doing it to them. Please stop doing that. That's my passionate plea, is don't let your family members walk around naked all day. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, one of my mantras is nobody wants to suck at work. No one wants to show up and not be good at what they do. It doesn't do anything for their ego, self-confidence, their ability to be wholeheartedly present for their own families and community responsibilities. So I love that. The emperor's new clothes. Okay, Rich, talk to us about when you're working with families, how do you help them see and address some of these issues that we're focused on today?
Well, again, I think what the beautiful thing about EOS combined with Predictive Index is it really starts to create standardization and objective roles and pathways to have success for the individual and for the business and for everybody, for the collective. And so really that's, to me, when you use all those words together, that's the heart of the work I do, which is governance planning, governance design, thoughtful planning. And so when it comes to family and how to create a system, you first need to look at what the overall rules are. And you'd be amazed at how many times just family enterprises don't have many rules for anybody. And so all of a sudden it becomes, we're making rules for the family, but not, which is probably the smallest population pool of employment, but we don't have rules for anybody else. And so that creates an imbalance. So the starting point to help families is, let's create rules. What's best for the business? What are the entry rules, qualifications, criteria to come in the business? What is the career development path for any employee? How do I get from here to there if I want to grow and evolve further in the organization? Who provides that feedback to me? And who provides that criticism, that constructive criticism, that mentoring to me as an employee, regardless if you're family or non-family? How do I get compensated in the system if I do a good job, right? And lastly, well, what if I really don't want to be here? How can I exit gracefully for the benefit of myself, for the benefit of my colleagues, for the benefit of the organization? And so if you look at all those elements combined, that's really true governance planning. And so if just, for example, there's a career development path for one person, why doesn't that apply to everybody, right? If there's not an entry point and criteria to get the job, right, then that starts to create a mismatch. And really the biggest challenge that families have when they bring in a family member under nepotism or not is really the management and stewardship and development of that family member by non-family employees. They are scared to death of being critical, even if it's justified, because that could be the end of their employment, right? Depends how that's taken. And so really setting clear boundaries from the leadership on top, making sure you've got the backing and support to your non-family employees who are mentoring your family members, and maybe just having hands off. I recall a situation where a family member, when I was running a family office, said, "Hey, it's time for my nephew who just graduated with a marketing degree to come in the business." And I said, "Okay, what does he want to do?" "Well, he wants to run the marketing department." I said, "Well, I get that, but didn't he just graduate last week? And he's never worked here in the summer, doesn't even really understand the business." And I said, "Hey, the only way this is going to work is if you let the executive team handle him, let him interview, right? Let him justify his existence. Let him come in here like everybody else. And you know what? The best place for him to start is probably on the third shift at the manufacturing plant to really understand the business." And that principal said, "You've got my full authority. Let's go for it." And so when we went through the process and we told his nephew that he was starting at the third shift in the plant in the wintertime where it's not well heated, his eyes kind of went like that. But everybody else in the organization gave thumbs up. So we had eyes wide open that were freaking out, with the rest of the organization thumbs up. And it really worked out, right? He wasn't given special treatment. He started and earned his own reputation. He gained confidence and understanding of the business, and he worked his way up. And this was, 7 years ago. He's still not head of the marketing department. And guess what? The role he's in today, he's loving what he's doing, and he really understands the business better probably than the principal, right?
We're going into our tips next, and some of the notes I have on the tips I want to make sure we share don't relate to that one. But if we could share one tip, it's got to be that, Rich, right? Start them at the lowest possible level on the hardest job, because they gain credibility, they gain insight. My first job on our family farm, my parents actually had $100 bet on me that day because I was sorting on a tomato harvester, sorting tomatoes when it was all done by hand. And you're on a harvester that's rocking backwards, forward, side to side. On one of the pieces where you rotate around, there's green waste flying down your back. Once in a while, there's a rat that comes across and a snake, and you have to get those out so they don't go in the load of tomatoes. And my parents had $100 bet. I can't remember who bet on me or against me, and that's probably for the best. But that I wasn't even going to last the day. But I did. And then they were like, "Actually, we have a different job in mind for you." Okay, great. But it was, I was the only one who spoke English, and it was a hard day, but it was okay, this is what work looks like. And if we get that for people, they gain so much street credibility with the organization. They go, okay, they know what we're doing. They know how hard our job is. They know what a night shift looks like. And that I think is a huge tip that we don't always take into account.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's looking at all the stakeholders who are impacted by every new person in the organization. And when you take a family member and put them probably in the least desirable position, right? And you have success, that's a morale boost for everybody else in the system. Like, wow, you thought enough of me to put, nephew or niece here in this position. And now he or she is part of our team and understands the stress that we have, can be a future advocate for us, can see solutions, and maybe advocate for things that we've talked about for years that never got anywhere. That's where innovation can happen, right? And that's where ownership can start to really take root.
And that's where some good ideas can come from, right? And great ability to ask questions to people you've already built a relationship with as a peer, not an underling. And that can be huge. So, okay, so I'm gonna take us into some of our other tips. The first one I have in my notes is one we've already touched on multiple times, and we're gonna come back to it because it's a drum we have to beat, and it's getting the right people in the right seats. And Sarah, you said something about, it becomes less personal this way. You talked about it in the GWC conversation, but give me your thoughts on aligning talent with roles rather than aligning roles with birthright or other factors.
Yeah. So tips are, if you want to go all the way with this, build an accountability chart the way Melissa described it. Nobody works here. What do we need for the business? And then say, who's the person uniquely skilled to do it? That is how you start this work. You say, no one works here. Or you say, we're buying a new company that has no humans in it, right? Take the faces, take the names off of it and define the actual seats. What do we need? What needs to get done? That is the number one tip here. The thing I would add into this that can help people, I kind of alluded to it with the grandpa and the daughter, is in a family business, there are three systems going on at all time. There's the family and the norms and the expectations in the family. There's the norms and the expectations in the business. And then there's the work Rich does around ownership. And the more you can separate those three things in your mind when you're figuring out right people, right seat, the less complicated and crazy it's going to feel to you. Because when we say in a family, you can't get kicked out. You have a seat around that table. In the business, you've got to earn your seat. There has to be a real seat for you. I like to say a family business can't say, have somebody come out of medical school and say, well, we need a doctor. Well, do you really need a doctor? Probably not. Do you need a doctor where Melissa was working? Probably, but did they have one? No, they had doctors who worked in hospitals who took care of them, right? So they have real seats inside of the business that you could be fired from. And then in ownership and all the important stuff Rich is talking about ownership, define what it takes to be an owner. And don't assume that just because you're in the family means you get a seat in the business, or just because we want you to be an owner means you have to work in the business. If you can separate that, that will also help just creating a great accountability chart for the benefit of the business a lot easier. It helps you separate the expectations that you might bring into it.
That could be an entire day on its own. And I love that you brought it in such simple terms, because it's kind of that, which role are you speaking from, but really specifying what problem are we working on? Are we working on an ownership problem, a business problem, or a family problem?
Yeah.
And I think that helps. So Rich, what input do you have on right people, right seats that we want to reiterate or introduce?
And so that 3-circle model that Sarah references, I subscribe to, and I've even added on a couple more circles. And I think it helps in this conversation. And the additional one, besides family and ownership and business, is individual, right? There's a whole system of individuals, because if you look at a family, that's the collective, but the collective is made up of individuals. So really understanding the individuals in the family system, having them understand themselves. In order to, I guess the best word is to self-actualize, right? What is their purpose? What is their meaning? What is going to make them fulfilled in life? And I think too often, a lot of people forget the individual, the I in team, because that's looked at as selfish. But I think it's really kind of like when you're flying on an airplane and before you take off, the steward says, hey, if we're about to go down and the oxygen mask falls down, put it on yourself before your child, right? That's not being selfish. That's being practical, and that's performative, right? You can't save someone if you're not alive yourself. So I think it's really important in the family system to look at the individuals as an entire system themselves and help them to get right-sized and understand where they want to go. That's really going to help once you have the accountability to chart, right? And know the substance that needs to be done, who can then fit in that seat properly.
That's good.
Rich, that's really powerful. I feel like so often in family organizations, it's the Three Musketeers, right? All for one and one for all. And it's teamwork makes the dream work. And we do it together and we lean in for each other. But there often isn't permission given to be separate, to be individuals, to have your own passions and pursue those things. And that's a very interesting point of view.
That's good. Melissa, what would you add to this?
Oh, you know me, I'm a tools girl. I want data. I want to know that they're in the right seat. I want to assess and make sure if we've got people in roles already that we're doing a pulse check to make sure they're operating in their unique genius zone, right? And so if over time we do a pulse on engagement or we do a pulse morale, we look at fit from the inside out to say, wow, this person feels like they need to be holding back some element of them, but really all they need is permission to go do more of it, permission to make a few more rules, permission to color outside the lines, whatever their natural approach is, that gives them the permission to be themselves, which maybe they haven't heard enough or at all. And so whether it's bringing someone new into the business or just doing a pulse check on where we are, I think there's tremendous value that can come out of that. So we have confidence that we do have the right people in the right seats, not just,
the willing people in the right seats. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to come back, Rich, to the topic we talked about, this toxic loyalty, because I think it happens way, way, way more often than we like to admit. Sarah, you alluded it to with the substance abuse, and it doesn't always benefit the people we're offering opportunities to because they feel this, like they need me here. It's going to fall apart if I leave. And I owe it to the employees who've depended on me. Maybe I did come up from the bottom and I've built great relationships. I've gotten rid of, two of our toxic leaders who'd been here a long time, but were not good for the organization. And now I've decided I need to extract myself from the business because it's not right for me. But that's choosing again between personal happiness and family loyalty. And how do we look for the flags of that, Rich? How do we stay on hyper alert? Because it doesn't benefit the people that we love or our relationships with them.
So in looking at toxic loyalty, it's not just about the negative acts, it's about the positive acts too, right? So oftentimes you'll see in family enterprises, multi-generational family enterprises, you'll not only see multi-generational family members, but you'll see multi-generational non-family employees who grow up watching their parents in the business, and they come into the business and they know the next gen because they're all at the company picnic. You're working on Saturday and you run into them then. You're in the summertime on holidays, you're working in the business, and their kids are too. And you kind of grow up in tandem. So what begins to happen if you're growing up in tandem with multi-generational families and multi-generational non-family employees, right? There becomes this culture, becomes this insular culture, and there becomes several cultures building at once, right? You as a family member may be saying, I need to agree all the time with my family member, otherwise we're going to have conflict. It's going to look like, again, I'm entitled. It's going to look like I'm unappreciative of what's happened. So it just becomes easier, a path of least resistance as a family member, to say, yeah, and to become that proverbial yes person. On the non-family employee side, it's almost identical, except they've got two families they need to approve. They need to approve of their parent or parents who work in the family business as a non-family member. And now they've been let in and they've got a high burden because their family members are saying, hey, I've been here forever. Do not screw this up, right? There's a high expectation of you to perform at my level or better because you are my child. Also, you've got this other family that you need to be supportive of, and that's the family employer, right? And sometimes they're your contemporaries. Sometimes the non-family member may even be older than the family member who was younger than them. And now what's the disparity? And so they know that they've got the pressure of their parents to perform, and now they've got this affection, maybe even love for this family who provided so much to their own family success and history. And so what happens is you've got yes, yes, yes on every side, and no one is saying you're about to drive off the cliff. Because again, if the family member says it, it looks like lack of appreciation, entitlement. From the non-family employee side, it looks like insubordination. Mm. So what happens? Everyone just keeps saying yes, yes, yes. So what do you do, right? Knowing that this is just common. This happens everywhere. It happens in non-family businesses too, right? But it's even more hyper-focused in family enterprise because of the relationship factor, right? It's not just about trying to get to the next level. It's about trying to maintain your place in family legacy, right? So one, you need to recognize it exists. Don't be ashamed of it. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's human nature, right? We're pleasers by spirit, right? And if you're in a family enterprise, your EQ is probably even higher. And so you're always trying to be a people pleaser. And so people pleasing is going to happen. You got to acknowledge it. And so sometimes you need to have some checks and balances to be like, well, is this really happening? Right? And it often takes a third party consultant many times, including the two of you and myself, to come into a system and really assess it. So I think it's important for families, and I'm not saying this from a self-gratification perspective or self-employment, but you really sometimes need the outside perspective. But you need to be careful. Hazard lights on. A lot of times your long-term family trusted advisor is also part of that toxic loyalty, because he or she's been your lawyer, your wealth manager, your accountant, your banker, right? Your insurance person, your technology provider. I mean, the list could go on, and they're part of the system too. And hey, they've got great affection for the family. They've got their own self-interest at heart too, that if maybe they're too honest, they may just be looked at as insubordinate and be the former wealth manager, the former attorney. And so there is all this toxicity. So I think it's really important for families, right? The family leadership needs to recognize this reality exists. They need to do a double check, and they really need to find a third-party fiduciary that's not afraid of being fired. It's hard to say that, who's willing to stand up and provide the honest truth. And you know what? When you do, it's a breakthrough. It's exactly what the opposite of what everyone thought the principal didn't want, because he or she recognizes that they are surrounded by yes people, right? And they want the truth. They want the best, and they can handle it. To make a line from that movie, they can handle the truth. So,
and it really comes back to the Emperor's New Clothes, right? No one wants to say anything, but I mean, Rich, one of the things I've seen that's been really effective outside of hiring amazing professionals like us is little things like the difference between when you're interacting with people, asking the one version is, hey, everything good? Versus, hey, what do you need? Priming for issues, saying, hey, what am I missing? What have we not thought of? And because it provides this window for little opportunities to speak up. And when they get positive reinforcement from those little opportunities, it leads to bigger and bigger ability to push back without that fear of, I'm going to let them down. I'm going to be insubordinate. I'm going to make my dad look bad if I'm a non-family member, because I've seen that so many times, multi-generations, leveling up together. And I know I want to watch our time pretty carefully. We're getting close to the top of the hour. There's one other tip I wanted to bring in, and it's this concept of, it's not an EOS concept, but it's one I've seen really work well in family businesses and elsewhere. Getting clear on what expectations exist, whether that's through your accountability chart, because we have clear roles and responsibilities that are created there, or just the expectations of what it takes to be a part of the business, what needs to get accomplished the next quarter or this year. Clear expectations, gaining agreement. So expectations are first, then we gain agreement. We cannot overstep this piece, because if you don't gain agreement, someone can always say, well, I didn't understand. And now we're a year down the road on a goal we thought we were in lockstep on, but never happened because, there's some scapegoat. So if we get super clear expectations, we get agreement on those expectations, and then we hold people accountable. And in family business, this can be so hard because there are lots of excuses. But to own this seat, these are the things that have to happen. And we can be hard on accountability and soft on people because we can blame it on the expectations and the role, not on the person. So we'll have to try something different if we can't get to this point, which means we need realistic expectations, back to the beginning of this loop. But just everyone at work wants to know how to win, from a front desk receptionist to the CEO. Everyone wants to know, what does a win look like? And so the more clear we can get around wins in each role, the more satisfaction and morale we have, the easier it is to recruit people, and the more fun we get to have at work. And back to Sarah's comment, family businesses are more fun when we're making money. Make money when everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. So, Sarah, do you see this in your work?
I do. And that's one of the things I love about EOS is the here are the expectations. Okay, we've agreed to it. Now we're going to follow through on it. It's, do what you say what you do, that whole piece. And when that muscle gets built, whether it's from EOS or some other system, I don't care. The thing that cures the disease is the thing you think will cure the disease. So if EOS is your cure, awesome. If it's something else, awesome. What I think is so valuable in this, and Rich, you kind of touched on it, I had to grab a pen and write it down, is this idea of, there's toxic loyalty when no one's willing to disagree. And so actually having the conversation to say, this is what it is, this is what we agree on. And if nobody's disagreed up until that point, then holding people accountable is when the real, conflict, if you will, actually shows up. And it's got to show up in one of those, or it hasn't actually happened. And people often think, conflict, it looks like hurt feelings and anger and tears. No, it just looks like, I disagree, or I think it should be this way, or we said it should be 10, I think it should be 9. That thing, which is what you were pointing at there, is if 10 is too many calls to make in a day, is 9 okay? Is 8? And does that actually work for it? And one of the things I like to say is, when you pick a system, whether it's EOS or something else, you can blame it on the system and not the person. And that's what I think you're talking about here, is what are the expectations? What do we agree to? And then let's be accountable to it. Now it's not anymore, I was always the bad kid, or mom always liked you best. It's, this is what we agreed to. Blame it on the system, not on the people. And again, not that family business isn't personal, it's deeply personal, but let's let it be personal where it should be, and stop having it be personal where it's not, where it doesn't need to be personal.
Well, we ran out of time for questions, and I apologize for that as our moderator. This could have been a 3-hour conversation easily. Most people don't have that time in their day. So thank you for your time talking about in the abridged version. If you'd like to reach out to Sarah, I'll put her contact information up. Same with Rich. I hope you'll join us for the next session. Looking forward to questions and responses to this as we put this out, and people see the recordings, ask their questions in the follow-up. But thank you so much for both of your time. It's great.
Thanks
discussion.
for having us.
A lot of fun. Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.